Okay, my name is Graham Davies. I'm the managing editor of BBC Cymru Wales Sport, which is essentially head of department. So that means I run the sports department, which covers TV, radio, online, social media. So I manage a team of about 60 members of staff, and then several freelancers, pundits, former players, and things like commentators and freelancers as well. So yeah, that's what my kind of daily routine is.
You've just mentioned it there, but can you expand on your current role at the BBC?
Among the things I do, obviously, I oversee a management team who then oversee the output. So I oversee management teams who look after radio, look after digital, look after TV, sport. But I also manage things like rights acquisitions. So one of my first things I did when I got the job was I got in contact with the chief exec of the United Rugby Championship, or as it was before then, the Pro 14. BBC had lost the rights to that in the previous cycle to Premier Sports, and I felt it was really important for us as a department and for audiences, particularly, we're trying to attract young and diverse audiences, that they love live sport, and it was really important to me, for the department, that we got some live sport back into the building. Obviously, then we also, my responsibility is in how to change our content, how to make it more relatable to newer and younger audiences, and kind of look at the diversity of our content, the diversity of our contributors.
Let's look back. So how did you get into this industry? Did you always want to get into this industry, or how did that come out for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I went to university in Cardiff, and I did an economics degree. So, but as soon as I started university, or just before, I kind of knew I wanted to get into the media some way. So I looked at different options of other courses, but Cardiff just suited me, and I looked into it and thinking, okay, what I need to do is, while I'm in university, get some experience if I can, and in the media, and then look to do a postgraduate diploma. So I did my university degree, loved my time in Cardiff, and part of the reason I always wanted to come back here. And then I did a postgrad in Birmingham, which was it was kind of a strange time of year. So I finished the university. The postgrad was a summer course. It was starting in the April, May, and then finished in the autumn. I then became a sports presenter. So I present a Friday night sports program, and I present bulletins in the morning, sports bulletins in the morning. So after a year of doing that, I then got approached by then editor, the then editor of Radio Wales News, who subsequently became my boss at Sport and is the one that left vacating this role. He contacted me because he'd heard a piece I'd done on radio, asking if I wanted to come down to work in Cardiff. I'd always wanted to get back to Cardiff, so I jumped at the chance. So I started working then in Radio Wales News, and I worked there for 3 years on the news desk, which was great fun, reading bulletins and writing stories and around some of the big stories of the time, which is including the Gulf War, including some major. I think one of the first stories I was sent to was a plane crash near Pontypool, and I was sent as a reporter on site. So it was a real baptism of fire, but it was a really, really enjoyable time. From there, then I went to the political unit for a few months on a kind of a job swap for someone. Not my favourite time in the BBC, if I'm honest, but it was a good experience to get. And then off the back of that, I was approached by the then sports editor, sports news editor, to see if I wanted to do some work in sport. And it was only on a rolling contract at first, and then I started off reporting for radio and TV, doing live radio, live TV, and then I moved into production. So I became a producer of Saturdays, so Saturday mornings and Saturday afternoons. And then eventually I became an assistant editor, and then got this job now as managing editor.
So you did your postgraduate course. So how was that step up from education to the real life world and real life job?
It was tricky. It was testing. I think I had a really good tutor. There's certain people in your career that will always stick with you. So I had a really good tutor, a guy called Bob Carver. At the time, just coincidentally, he happened to have worked in Radio Shropshire before I was there, and he was the tutor in Birmingham, and he taught me really well how to write good copy. And I always say to everyone, be able to write, really, really succinct, good copy. Works on all platforms. So if you can write, if you script well, it works for radio, it works for TV, it works for digital. and that's always stuck with me. It's kind of almost that 3-line thing he used to say was, tell me the headline, tell me the backstory, and tell me what's happened next, which is it's always stuck with me ever since I've gone into all forms of broadcast, whether that's radio, TV, or online. So then transitioning into Radio Shropshire was a bit of a baptism of fire, because you go into an industry there where you're the new person, and pretty much it felt like everyone else had like 20 years of experience, and you quickly find out what your failings are. You quickly find out what you need to be better at, and it was a difficult time. And it was almost that first job challenges your conviction, really challenges. Oh, do you really want to do this job? Because I was struggling a little bit, sort of struggling to adapt to a different atmosphere, because obviously it's fairly a safe environment in the university course. It's good and it's challenging, but it's fairly safe. You're not gonna, you're not gonna libel anyone. You're not gonna mess up on a BBC station. And so Radio Shropshire was, it was a testing experience.
So you mentioned earlier that got the opportunity to come back to Cardiff, and you always wanted to come back to Cardiff. But was that quite a difficult decision to make? Because obviously you just had to move straight away and leave everyone that you've left behind from where you were from. So was that a difficult decision to make, or were you just determined to get back to Cardiff?
Even though I really wanted, I lived in Cardiff for 4 years around university, and even though I knew I wanted to come back here eventually, it was difficult because I'd settled in the Midlands. I had really good friends in Worcester, but it was difficult. It was quite scary. I didn't have anywhere to live in Cardiff, so and it was the conversation I'd had with my then editor of Radio Wales News, Jeff Williams, who went on to become my boss at Sport, was, okay, well, I'll give you a month contract. So, that's quite, because I've been on a 12-month contract with Worcester. It's like, okay, I've got to back myself. You've got to just think, okay, I can do this job. I'm going to go and prove I can do it. And it became a rolling contract, and eventually became a permanent contract. But it was challenging. I didn't know anyone there, obviously. So because I'd been in university, my postgrad was in Birmingham, and because I'd been there, I knew a lot of people around the Midlands circuit. So if I was working in Hereford and Worcester, it was often another person from that course was in the station as well. But this was completely different. I didn't know anybody there, so it was challenging, I guess. I did it without thinking. I said, I took the job without thinking, and then after taking it, I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a bit of a new start, but it was the best thing I ever did.
So now, looking at your current role now, so how do you prepare yourself for like big international sporting events? I know you've worked. What's the word? You worked in tournaments like Euro 2016, Euro 2020, and you're hoping that Wales, for instance, will get into the World Cup this year. So, how do you prepare yourself for that? Do you feel pressure with that? Yeah,
it is pressure. I think what was good about the Euro 2016 was totally new, so we'd never been there before, and that's good and bad in the same way. So, because we're not as adept at those major events, and we've done Rugby World Cups and we've done Commonwealth Games, but a football global event like Euros or potentially World Cup now is on another level. It's just things like the sheer cost of things makes you realise how big it is, the number, the audiences you get. So it was a completely new experience for us. I think it is pressure, but I think you just got to be calm. I think you've got to get the best people around you. So if you've got to almost make a decision quite soon. Okay, who do I need on this project? So you need someone to look after logistics, someone to look after editorial, someone to look after production. You need to start thinking about who your broadcast teams are going to be.
So you mentioned how you want the best team around you. How do you identify that in the huge team that you work with? How do you identify the right people to take with you?
Yeah, it's twofold really. I guess I've got an idea of who are the multi-skilled people. You've got some people, for example, we've got one guy who went out to the Tokyo Olympics for us, and he's the only person that went, but he can broadcast, he can shoot, edit, he can write online, he can cut brilliant social media content, and he had encyclopedic knowledge basically of Olympic stuff. So he was clearly the best fit for the job. You've got to look at it a couple of ways. So you also need to know what the commissioners want. So who does the Radio Wales editor want as their commentator? Who does they want as a presenter? Likewise Radio Cymru, likewise Wales Today, and the word on. Now, it's not always the case that whoever they want will necessarily have to be the person, but it's a big influencer, because it may be that they want X person as a presenter, and their second option is B. I've got X and B instead of A and B. But if they want A and their second option is B, it may be that person B offers more elsewhere, offers more in terms of creativity, in terms of production, online, digital experience, shoot, edit skills, that kind of thing. And that ability to to film and cut content is even more important, now than it was in 20. It was important in 2016. It's critical now. So, for example, we're currently looking at our Commonwealth Games team, and I think the vast majority can shoot, edit, and they can also broadcast. And we have to train those people up as we go along. So, we look at it at that time, at a snapshot in time. Okay, this is what the commissioners want. Okay, that's fine. We take that into consideration. But what does the output need? What do the audience need? So the audience need people who can deliver video content. The audience need people who can deliver social media content, people who can write for online. And then we think, okay, well, working within our parameters of the budget of how many people we can send. And you can't carry anyone. You can't say, well, we're just going to take someone just as a commentator. We haven't got that luxury, and that's not the best way to spend license fee money either. So we need to make sure everyone offers something extra.
Do you have any difficult conversations with people in terms of when you were picking your team for these sporting events? For instance, like a national submission for Wales, you got a selection of a group of players and you have to pick a certain number. Did you have to have any difficult conversation with people that maybe really wanted to go and experience maybe their first tournament, whatever, but to say, oh, maybe not this time, I have to take these people as they can do this, etc., etc.
Yeah, I have that regularly, and it's not just around major events, but it's around, even as things as, we had an FA Cup final a good few years ago now when I was a producer, and I chose one commentator over another, and I had to explain why. I look at the Euro 2016. I had conversations with a friend of mine who I was managing at the time, who was a presenter, and I didn't take him. I took another presenter instead, and there was a reason, and there was another guy who's I've worked with for years. I was a peer of his, and I was a manager of his. He'd commentated on Wales for years, and he'd lost that kind of gig 2 years before the tournament, which is obviously bad timing for him, but he was asking why he wasn't going to be going, because he covered Wales for so long. He could do it so many different roles, and I think you just got to be confident in your decision making. Be honest. I think people, if you try to hide anything, they'll see right through you. I think you've got to be authentic and honest and say, look, this is what I have to do, and you've got to stand by your decision.
So I don't know if you have, but have you experienced any egos in your team, and how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that?
Egos can be a good thing as well, though. So yes, I think in broadcasting and media in general, egos are everything. People have. I don't think people. I think if anyone tells you who's a on-air personality or a broadcaster that they don't have an ego, I think they're lying, right? So they're broadcasting. They want to be on air. They want to be talking about things, and I think, and they should be. They should have pride in doing that. So they should want to do that, and I think that's what ego is. And I think sometimes you just have to accept it. Accept people got egos, and I've never been one for massaging egos unless I need to, and I'll come to that in a bit. But in terms of, I also work with a lot of former footballers and co-commentators, former rugby players, the same, and they all want to be in these major events. But I can only take one person to co-commentate. I'm not going to, you can't take three commentators in France. Use one on the first game, one on the second game, one on the third. You take one commentator and a consistent voice. So again, you have to be clear and with why you're taking a particular person. You take the best person for the job, and then you just have to be honest with whoever hasn't got the job. And they do have egos.
I'm interested to hear your take on sort of similar to egos, but say you've got someone who is a top professional, is great at what they do, but maybe difficult to work with, who's difficult working with others, or difficult just to work with in generally. What's your standpoint on that? if you had the choice, like, would you choose them because they produce the best work, etc., etc., or do you pick someone who is more of a team player, I guess, or yeah? So or
Yeah, it's a good question.
was it 50-50?
It's a bit of both. I always say because we always saying quite for BBC World relatively small teams to events. I think I remember sending a producer to Lions Tour in New Zealand, and I felt he was quite introverted and likes working on his own a lot. And I said to him, you just got to remember, just be a good tourist, as in get on well with the team, and if you get on if you work well as a team, they'll work well better for you as well. And so you have to have the balance. So he was an example of someone who was delivered loads of great content, but the feedback I had was he kind of worked alone a lot, and then that the team is always greater than the sum of its parts. So I think it would have worked better had they all worked closer together. So I think it's a balance. You don't want to give someone it's like you wouldn't give just someone who happens to be a great team player, gets on well with everyone, but doesn't deliver anything. But likewise, you don't want someone who's brilliant at delivering several bits of content but doesn't collaborate, because actually then you're probably duplicating a lot of the work if you're not collaborating, because other people aren't aware of what you're doing. So communication on any event like that is key.
And now looking more generally, what are the biggest challenges you've faced during your career?
Looking ahead or already been?
Already been.
Any change is difficult to manage. So, and the biggest part of any change is people. So you can change. We've moved to this new building in the centre of town. That was a big change, because it's all from 2002 to 2019. It's all I knew was Llandaf, and then we had the lockdown, and then we moved to the new building. People have been there a lot longer than I have, and so that sort of change is difficult. It's I heard anecdotally some people saying, they don't want to move because they've always had the same desk next to the same window for 20 years, which it's not something I would be particularly bothered about. But everyone, like I said before, everyone was different. Everyone has their own idiosyncrasies. So change is always difficult. When we've changed to digital first model, when we've restructured the team, I think that the most difficult periods are always change, and again, that's all about being honest to people, explaining why we're changing, explaining why it's the benefit of audiences ultimately, but also the BBC in terms of how we're adapting to future needs and changing audience trends. And we moved to this new building because it was a better facility. It would enable us to deliver better content, enable us to deliver HD content on TV. We've worked closer together. We're in the middle of the city, which is obviously more connected with other organisations. So as long as you communicate the need, why the change is important, why it's done, and it's not done for the sake of it. That's key. I think the other big challenges have always been, but ones I've enjoyed have always been breaking news stories. So I was the editor on duty when Gary Speed died, and that was a challenge. But again, it's the same principles for me. I just made sure I had the best people around me. So I didn't let anyone leave the building, because even though they'd finished their shift, it was like one of those, okay, well, everyone's staying because this is a big breaking news story. So you have the best people around you, you're clearing, you're communicating. So I think in any challenge, that's it. You kind of surround yourself with good people, be clear, be honest, be straight talking, make decisions. So sometimes it might not be the right decision, but you've almost got to, you may think, I could have done that slightly differently. But I think there's time where people need clarity and they need honesty and they need people to communicate. So things like that. Gary Speed, when Wales coaches have been sacked, I've been on duty with them, and it's the same principle. I was in Glasgow when Rhys Williams, the hurler, failed a drugs test. So again, it was gathering people around me, just being kind of calm, communicating. I think the biggest challenge is always change. I enjoy managing change as long as I believe in it.
You mentioned earlier about it might have, when you make decisions, they might not always be the best ones. So have you made, obviously I suppose you have, but you've made mistakes during your career. Do you regret them? do you think it's helped benefit you for future stuff you've done? And yeah, so what's your take on mistakes? How do you deal with them?
Yeah, it's I have made mistakes. I'm thinking of some major events that I planned and I've taken the wrong people, and I've made a decision based on all the facts I had at that time. And sometimes you're not going to know things until you get to places, and then you, on reflection, thinking actually probably would have had a different makeup of this team. Sometimes I would have taken fewer people, and it would have worked. Strangely, even though fewer people would have worked better. I've got 3 kids. I always say to them, you learn from, life is all about learning from mistakes. And I think if you think you're going to make everything perfect every time, then you're going to quickly come unstuck. I think what I learned about that was, don't necessarily, I worked on one major event where I thought, okay, that's the model I had from the last game, so I'll go with that model again. But it was a different sport. It was a different setup, different rights scenario. So I should have taken more of that into consideration in hindsight. But again, it'll teach me for the next phase. So that was the Rugby World Cup in 2019 in Japan, which obviously got time difference issues. And the next Rugby World Cup is in France in 2023 next year. But I kind of got a better understanding now of what sort of team I'd take to there and how that team would be shaped. So yeah, I think you always learn from your mistakes. I think as long as you're honest about that, and if people are challenging, saying this little things like I remember there's one time when Brendan Rodgers was leaving Swansea City to Liverpool, and I was running the news desk at the time, and I made a news judgment based on a report. One of our reporters had given me information, made that judgment, and somebody challenged me and said, another news reporter for the BBC has said this, and I said, okay, I'm backing my reporter because they've worked on Swansea for so many years. What I didn't know at the time was the other reporter, and if I could have done some digging to find this out, the other reporter was very close with Brendan Rodgers, so he was more likely to get insight into that story. And so nothing went wrong on air, but on reflection, it probably would have saved us time had I gone, okay, let's analyse where he's getting his information from, rather than steadfastly backing your own man. I do believe in backing your own team and trusting them. And there's nothing that my reporter said that was necessarily wrong. It's just this other reporter had more information. So I think, little things like that. I think you just learn as you go along. I think actually sometimes, take a step back, pause, think, it's easy to get lost in the moment in a big breaking story, but sometimes step back, pause, give yourself 5 seconds to think, what's the best decision to make here? And again, that's something else I learned.
And now just looking at the future of journalism, it's obviously getting bigger and bigger. More courses on university are coming, and I suppose the next bunch of journalists are coming through, and I suppose the news desk is maybe getting younger. I don't know if that's fair to say. So, how are you preparing for that, and what are you looking for in these new bunch of journalists coming through?
I'm not sure news desk. Yeah, I guess. Are they getting younger? I'm not sure. I think what's important is, particularly the BBC, is that it probably, if the news desk does get younger, it's no bad thing, because we need to attract. We historically attract a really got a heartland audience, particularly BBC Wales 50 plus. We need to attract younger audiences, and I think the only way we can attract younger audiences is by having younger content makers. So, there's no way. I can try as much as I can. I'm in my 40s. I don't think I necessarily know what a 21-year-old person wants from content, what they want from a story. And I think the best people to tell me that are 21-year-old people. And I think the more people we can get that reflect the audience and the population in general, and that's age, ethnic background, gender, all sorts. Because if we get a really good cross-section of society working in journalism, that's the best way will reflect the content, reflect the audience back to themselves. So I think that it's important we get young people in this, but it's also important we have a mix as well. So we have some people with more experience, some with people who know what the 50 plus audience is, because we can't forget them either. Even when we're attracting younger audiences, we can't forget what the older generation want as well, and to keep those heartland audiences. So it's a balance. I think what I want young journalists to come into is basically the ideas, creativity, still the basics are always important. So how to tell a story in 3 sharp sentences is really important. It still works on any platform. If you can, like I said, if you can write a story in 3 lines, that will work across any platform. It's just how you tell it differently. Sometimes you can tell that through video, through graphics, through basic text. But I think young journalists, you've proven this now, need that ability to produce video content, because video content is clearly a big push for BBC. BBC at the minute are putting a big push on video content as well. Again, that attracts younger, more diverse audiences.
And finally, just wrapping this up now. So, what are your future ambitions?
Myself personally, or for I don't know. I really enjoy my job, so I guess my ambitions for my job are always about seeing other people develop. So I want to evolve the department. I want to make the department more reflective of our audience. So at the minute we've got quite an older department. It's changed significantly in the last couple of years, but it needs to change even more. We need to turn the dial even more. We need to get greater diversity within the team, and I just want to see young people coming into the industry develop. And nothing gives me more pleasure at the minute than seeing someone who comes in. Someone who came in as a researcher a couple of years ago is now broadcasting on breakfast on radio, presenting breakfast bulletins. People who I see who came in as a reporter now are lead presenter on TV content. So I think my ambition is to change. I really want to change the department. I want to make it even more inclusive, even more diverse, even more representative of the audience, and just give people the best possible platform to progress. And that's including, the next person who takes my job is actually give my management team. It may not be one of them, maybe someone else, but give them the platform to take over as and when I move to a different place.
And finally, you mentioned it there. What impact do you want to leave on the BBC if you do eventually leave the company in whenever?
Yeah, good question. I guess I think the biggest thing for me is that as a manager, I don't think you can hope to be liked, but if people think, as long as people know, I've always been fair and honest and straightforward and kind of transparent in everything I do, that's important. And I think kind of the legacy I want to leave for the sports department, I have made changes in the last year and a half in terms of our output. I just think when I leave, if I can say, okay, the content, what audiences are seeing is significantly different from when I started. It's significantly different in terms of representation, in terms of diversity, in terms of reach, in terms of impact. I think I'd be happy.
That's great. Thank you very much.
All right.